Hi everyone, welcome to the next lecture of Let's Talk UPSC in the Sociology free series on YouTube. So, in this lecture, basically, I'll be trying to cover Talcott Parsons, and in the previous class, we have done Emile Durkheim, who was a functionalist. So, in this class, we'll be doing yet another functionalist, and he is none other than Talcott Parsons. Right. So remember his name is Talcott Parsons. S is a part of his name. It's not like we're using it in plurality, right? So his name is Talcott Parsons, and he is a very famous American sociologist, and he is also a functionalist. Right? He is also a functionalist. So to understand what this functionalism is, you can go back to Emile Durkheim's video, the part 1, where we have in detail talked about functionalism. We have talked about the critiques of functionalism, and we have also talked about, given certain examples of how functionalist theory is applied, right? So, Talcott Parsons is also a modern functionalist in as much as that he was not an early sociologist, but he was very, very appreciative of this functionalism theory, and also he was appreciative of the American society in general, right? He was very fond of American society, maybe because he was an American and he was very fond with American society. And in most of his teachings, you can easily identify that he glorifies America, right? So that is the pinch of salt that you have to take his theories with, because he glorifies America, and whatever the Americans does, Talcott Parsons usually tells that that is the right way of doing it, right? So in Talcott Parsons, if you see the UPSC syllabus, you can see that there are two things. Very simply, there are two things. One is a social system, and the other one is pattern variables. So these are the only two things that we will be doing, because that is what is essential for the exam, right? So these are the two theories of Talcott Parsons that we are going to study, right? So let us now start with what exactly Talcott Parsons meant when he talked about his theory of social system, right? So before actually understanding what social system is, you must be having this idea of what functionalism is, right? Because in functionalism, if we have seen, we might have understood how a system is made up of many parts, right? And each part or each subsystem has its own function, and this function is nothing but the positive contribution that it makes to the system as a whole, right? So uh, that is what is functionalism, or what basically functionalist theory basically tells, right? So if you have to basically understand what this functionalism theory means, then you have to basically understand that society is like a body. Okay, like in our body, if you see, there are many parts performing different functions. So in the same way, society is also something that has many parts, and each of them perform a different function, right now. Yeah, so we have to do this part called the social system. So for Parson, social system is nothing but a plurality of individual actors. Okay, there are these individual actors who are interacting in a particular environmental sphere. Okay, environmental sphere, and they are basically guided by certain culturally structured and shared symbols, right? So the definition could be a little bit confusing. So, the takeaway is that there are certain individual actors, okay, and they are kept in certain environmental sphere. That is a situation basically, and in that situation, whatever these individual actors do, right? Whatever they do, it is guided by these culturally structured and shared symbols that are already given by the society, right? So that is what Talcott Parsons says by his theory of social system, right? He further, to simplify it, he says, or he can say, basically we can say that there are certain characteristics of a social system. Okay, and after listening to these characteristics, you will be more clear about what exactly a social system is, right? So A, it involves an interaction between two individuals or two or more individuals, right? Interaction between two or more individuals. Okay, and how are these individuals interacting? Basically, they are interacting in a particular situation, right? They are interacting in a particular situation. And thirdly, they are interacting in such a situation where there is common values and goals, and these are framed by the society itself. Okay, these are already there, and sorry, and each and every individual has a particular role that he has to perform in that particular situation, right? Role is already assigned. So this is basically his theory of social system, right? Coming back, you can see that there are individual actors who are acting in a situation. This is the definition. In the definition, it is given that they're acting in an environmental sphere, but you can tell that they're acting in a situation where their actions are guided by culturally structured and shared symbols. And the characteristics are these four: interaction is there, the situation is present, there are common values and goals that are set by the society, and the roles of the individuals are already assigned, right? So if you see all this, basically what are we understanding? We are going back to the functionalist theory. In functionalist theory, when we were doing the functionalist theory, we did one thing, right? In functionalism, the society is always greater than the individual. Do you remember Durkheim's suicide theory, in which he definitely or completely removed the psychological basis of an individual, and he said that whatever is happening, whatever when a individual commits suicide, he is doing it because of the lack of moral integration in the society and the moral cohesion in the society, and there is no solidarity in the society. That is the reason he gives, right? We have done that integration. You remember the table that we have done of integration and regulation, where there is no moral regulation and where the regulation is very very less, or where there is very very high moral regulation or moral interaction. That is where suicide happens, right? So Durkheim basically he brings in the whole concept of suicide as it is belonging to that of the society. He completely downplays the individual, right? The individual's fact is gone. That is what functionalism basically does. For functionalism, society is always the biggest thing than the individual. And even if you go back to what Talcott Parsons, who is also a functionalist, says, he says that here the common values are already there in the society and the roles are also already assigned. So by this he means that there is no power to the individual again. Okay, there is no power to individual. Okay, it is all done and dusted, that the society is already doing everything for you. You just have to be in that situation and do your part, right? Do your role. Okay, now what exactly is this role? What does he mean when he says his role? Right, for example, I am, I am teaching you, right? For example, I am X, okay, and I am using this online platform to teach you. For doing what? For teaching you, right? So I become a sort of a teacher or a sort of a mentor. So that is the role that is assigned to me by the society. And how do I teach? The way I teach is I use a proper language. I should always be, bounded by certain rules and regulations, that I cannot use some obscene scenes while teaching, or I cannot use some faulty language while teaching, right? So that is all what the society, all this is what the society has already set for me. The role that I'm performing is that of the teacher here, right? The role is that of the teacher, and for the teacher, how to behave, the standards are already set. Remember in the first class when we were talking about sociology as a subject, what does it do? And wherein I took the example, if there is a male teacher in the class, what is he told to do? That he has to come in, he has to wear a formal dress. He can't wear a sari and come, when especially when he's a male, right? He has to wear a formal dress, maybe a white shirt and pant, formal pant, right? And he has to wear some shoes or certain sandals, right? He can't wear certain slippers or bathroom slippers to the class, right? So that is not allowed. So these are who said these all? These are all said by the society. It's the same thing as what Talcott Parsons is saying by his social system theory, right? So very very simple. The definition might look like it is very very hard or difficult to understand, because Talcott Parsons has made sociology a jargon based study. He unnecessarily brought in a lot of big terms. Jargons are big terms, big English words. Like even in its definition, if you see, you can see that there is individual actor, environmental sphere, culturally structured, shared symbols. All these are like big words, right? One of the criticism of Talcott Parsons is that he made sociology very difficult for laymen to understand, right? So he made it a very jargon based study, but his theory is very very simple, right? So the theory, I think you have understood what exactly the social system theory is. Very simple, four different points. Interaction between two individuals in a situation, they have common shared values and goals, and their roles are already assigned by the society. As simple as that, right? This is what you have to remember from the social system theory of Talcott Parsons. And nextly, to understand the social system, or to understand how the people basically behave, the interaction between the two or more individuals, he gives this theory, or basically a form of a study called that of the functional prerequisites. Functional prerequisites. Again, if you see, this name itself very boring or very not understandable. That again, Talcott Parsons basically brings in some vocabulary of American English and uses it in sociology, right? Making sociology very difficult to understand, but the theory is very simple. Okay, so firstly, let me tell you what exactly these functional prerequisites of Talcott Parsons is, right? So for Talcott Parsons, basically he says that any successful social system has four functional prerequisites, right? So earlier we have done what is a social system. It is a individual actors acting in a particular situation, and they're performing the role that is assigned to them, and which are defined by commonly set up goals and shared values and goals, right? So for any social system to be successful, he says that there are four functional prerequisites that have to be followed, right? So what are these four functional prerequisites? This is also called the AGIL paradigm. Okay, AGIL framework or AGIL paradigm. Okay, and what are these AGIL? A, G, I, and L. Okay, A is adaptation, G is goal attainment, I is integration, and L is latency. Okay, this is what our functional prerequisites. Now you might not understand what exactly this is, because I have just told you the words that Parsons is using. Now let me simplify it for you, right? So any social system, right? So social system might be a society, right? A society, if you can say a society, today I'm going to take the example of a tribal society. Okay, a tribal society consisting of several tribes who belong to a particular society. They are having their own cultural norms and cultural values that are already set, right? So let us take the example of a tribal society and understand how these four are important for this tribal society to sustain. Because Talcott Parsons says that for any social system to sustain, they need these functional prerequisites. And now let us analyze whether these functional prerequisites are really necessary for a social system to sustain or not, by taking the example of this tribal society. Alright. So the first one is adaptation. So by adaptation, as in the name itself says, is to basically adjust to the environment. Okay, adjusting is nothing but the adaptation, adjust to the environment around, right? So it basically means that you have to have your own resources to adjust to a particular society, right? And how do you get this? Basically by economy, by earning money, or by basically going out and getting whatever you need. And in a tribal society, how does this happen? It happens by hunting animals, gathering food, right? This is how they adapt to the situation, because tribals are not so much integrated with the mainstream society, right? So whatever they do it in the forest, and they hunt and gather, and by that way they adapt to the harsh conditions of the forest itself, right? So secondly, goal attainment. So for any individual and for any society for that matter, there is a particular goal that you have to reach, right? So this is nothing but attaining a goal. Okay, there should be a motivation to attain the goal, and this is basically done by the political system of a country. In India, if you see, India's goal might become to become a 5 trillion economy by the end of few years, right? So that is something a political system can do by bringing in political laws, political that this, right? So in a tribal society, how does this happen? This happens when there are certain rules that are set, right? And these rules are nothing but the goals, that the end goal is so and so, that tomorrow we have to be integrated in the society, or tomorrow we have to not be integrated in the society, right? And next is integration, that is the process of getting everyone to coordinate and establish coherence and solidarity. No matter how many rules are there, no matter how many regulations are there in a society, if the rules are not followed by everyone, the society will not go anywhere, right? So this is what is this is what the function of I is. So that the society or the social system should be integrated, there should be coordination, there should be coherence, and there should be solidarity. How does this happen in a tribal society? The tribal society might frame certain rules, or there might be certain beliefs, or there might be certain customs. Sorry if you're not able to see, but the simple thing that I wrote there is that there should be certain beliefs, or there should be certain customs that have to be followed in the tribal thing, bringing the whole society together, right? The fourth one is a very important function, that is of latency. Latency means pattern maintenance and tension management. Again, these are nothing but the terms that Parsons uses. But pattern maintenance and tension management means, even if having these three, if the society has to move forward, if these three are there, the society can function for the time being. But what about the future generations, right? For the future generations to hold on, we need this latency functioning, which means pattern maintenance and tension management. Pattern maintenance meaning whatever the tribals are doing today, right? Their children also have to do it. The children's children also have to do it, right? And further, this goes on and on. Only then the tribal culture will be prevailing. And how can this happen? This can happen by education system, right? And sometimes there comes a time of tension, that is the tribals thinking ki maybe our culture is going to die soon, and what will happen next and all. For that you need tension management, that is given by your family. The family, what does it do? It basically brings in the people together and tells that this, the family functions as a rule to make sure that a sort of positivity is given to the people, and that that the generations will keep continuing to flourish, right? So for any social system, here we have taken the example of a tribal society, but you can take the example of any other social system. And for the social system to survive, basically these are the four functional prerequisites. So prerequisites, I think you know what this word prerequisite is. Prerequisite is nothing but the what you exactly need for a particular thing to be done. Okay, so for a tribal society to become a flourishing society or to continue flourishing, these are the things that it has to do following this framework or agile paradigm, which Talcott Parsons famously called the prerequisites, right? So these are the functional prerequisites. However, Talcott Parsons also further elaborates on this, and he says that functional prerequisites, every system, okay. For example, let us take that this is the system. He says that the boundaries of the system are very clear, okay. They're very clear and they're significant, okay. And if there is another system, it also has certain clear boundary set. This is system 2, this is system 1. And the boundaries of this system or the cultures of this system will be entirely different from the cultures of this system, is what Parsons says. And he also says that if at all there is a particular change in the system 1, okay, for example, like there are certain parts in system 1, let us say A, B, C, D, and if A changes, it impacts B, and it further impacts D, and it impacts C. Okay, this is what he calls as equilibrium, right? So in equilibrium, he says that every system has a clear boundary, and the maintenance of the boundary is a function of the system. And if at all a subsystem changes, right, then that basically means that every other part also undergoes a certain change, right? So that is what he calls that moving equilibrium. Okay, whenever there's a change, it is called a moving equilibrium. Usually a system is in the form of a equilibrium position, but if one subsystem changes, then it becomes a moving equilibrium, right? So this is basically his functional prerequisites theory. Let us look at the criticism, some of the criticisms that people tell about Talcott Parsons' theory of functional prerequisites and that of also social system, right? So the one major criticism is that he made it a jargon-based study. First of all, he brought in many difficult words. Secondly, uh, this whatever he says of functional prerequisites and the social system maintaining its own boundaries, they cannot basically explain the very fast changes, right? If at all any system undergoes a very fast change, that cannot be explained by Talcott Parsons theory. Okay, he can only explain gradual changes, but he cannot explain sudden disproportionate changes, right? And they also, many critics also argue that his theory is very static in nature, that it is very small, it is very narrow, and that it is not a broad or a general theory that can be used in every situation. And he basically, and the critics basically say that it is very static, right? However, through the agile framework, Parsons explains the main contribution of Parsons through this agile framework is that he explains how certain societies are still prevalent in the current situation and are still continuing, prevalent and are still continuing, right? The tribal societies, okay, sorry for the spelling, but they're still prevalent and they're continuing. How they are still prevalent and how they are still continuing, that is what we understand from Talcott Parsons Agile Framework, right? So that is all about Talcott Parsons Agile Framework. Now let us look at the second part of Talcott Parsons, that is his very famous theory of pattern variables. Say if a non sociology person is basically told this word pattern variables, would you be able to understand that this is a study of something related to sociology? No, it doesn't look. It looks like a mathematics word, right? Like variables x, y, etc. And there's a pattern in the variables, right? So that is why Talcott Parsons is discredited by saying that he made sociology very difficult to understand. He made it a jargon based study. Jargon means very difficult words. He used very difficult words, something that sociology is usually not, you know basically doesn't use such words. Many of the other sociologists don't use such big words, excluding Marx, because Marx is a little again a difficult person to understand. His theories are again jargon based, but he was not a complete sociologist. He was also economist. So hence we can say that a little, we can give a little leniency to Marx, but Talcott Parsons is discredited with this thing that he has been using a lot of jargons, right? Now what is this pattern variables, right? So pattern variables are nothing but, I'll just explain in a very simple term. Okay, let us say that you have a situation here in front of you. Okay, going back to the social system example wherein he said that it is a interaction between two individuals, right? A is there and B is here. Okay, they are interacting in a situation. This is what a social system is, what um, Talcott Parsons said in his theory, right? So this is a situation that he said. So in this situation, if A here becomes a social actor because he has to act in the situation, and B becomes the counter actor. Okay, and in this situation now A has to act, and when A is acting in this situation, he says that there are five pattern variables that he has to answer before acting in the particular situation, and based on that he will act in a particular situation. Okay, so I hope you understood that. For example, let us say that A is a teacher and B is the student. Now A has to teach. Teaching is a situation, and how does he teach is basically depend on five pattern variables. Okay, so let us see what are those pattern variables, and after that I'll explain you properly each pattern variable with an example so that you understand what exactly it means. Okay, the first one is ascription versus achievement. Second one is diffuseness versus specificity. Third one is particularism versus universalism. Fourth one, affectivity affectivity versus affective neutrality. You see the terms that Parsons has been using to make us all confused, but don't worry, I'll explain everything in detail. Then you have collective orientation versus self orientation. Right. So these are the five pattern variables that Talcott Parsons basically says that in any situation, these are the five pattern variables that a person has to, that a social actor basically has to confront, and he has to choose one among them, and only then he can proceed further in the situation, right? So that is what pattern variables are. Pattern variables are nothing but they help the actor to understand and negotiate with the action situation and manifest a particular kind of behavior. Only when A understands what he has to do in this particular situation using these five pattern variables, he will be able to behave in this particular situation. So that is basically what pattern variables are. So they help the actor understand and negotiate with the action situation and manifest a particular kind of behavior. And I forgot to mention the book of Talcott Parsons. It is The Structure of Social Action. This is the book of Talcott Parsons. Though his theory is social system theory, but the name of the book is The Structure of Social Action, because the main difference here is social action is that of an individual, right? And when multiple individuals do that, it becomes a social system, right? That is what he basically says, that social action is that of an individual, but when multiple individuals come forward and make many social actions, they become a social system, right? So social system is the main thing that he concentrates on, but the name of his book is The Structure of Social Action. So let us now understand what he meant by all these five pattern variables, right? So the first pattern variable is ascription versus achievement, right? So in this particular situation where A is a teacher and B is a student, now if A has to act or teach B, first he has to undergo this particular situation wherein A has to identify whether B is a student of him based on the ascription status or achievement status. Should A see B as a Brahmin or as a student, just a student? If he is seeing as a Brahmin, that means he is using his ascriptive nature, right? If he's just seeing him as a student, that means he is seeing him as on the basis of his achievement. So that is a choice A has to make. Okay. If he sees in this way, he can see it in that way, and if not, in this way. And he has to choose between ascription and achievement, right? Secondly, diffusiveness versus specificity. Okay. Now, if A is teaching B, should he just teach a particular subject or should he teach subject as well as life lessons? Okay, so this dilemma or this pattern variable basically says that when you're acting with respect to a counter actor, should you basically be diffuse? That is, you have to teach him many things, or act in many different ways, or you have to specifically act in that particular situation, right? So that is what the second pattern variable is. The third one is particularism versus universalism. So particularism basically means if a society is particular, it means that they are very, very value laden. Plus, there are many beliefs in the society. And if it is universal, that means that the society is very rational and very independent, and also it is very individualistic, right? So, these are the two different things. The fourth pattern variable is affectivity, affective neutrality. A as a teacher here to B, should A develop certain good feelings towards B, or he has to be effectively neutral? That is, he has to just be a teacher to B and not develop any feelings, right? So that is another dilemma that A has, and based on what he chooses, he will do that particular thing to B. If he chooses to be B's friend, maybe he might not teach well to B. Whenever B fails an exam, he might not scold so much if he's a friend. But if he's as a teacher, if he's acting, he can very strictly tell B that your performance is going down and you need to buckle up and do something. Otherwise, you will not be able to do good well in the future, right? So it depends on what A chooses, whether he has to be affective or affectively neutral. That is without any emotions or with emotions. The fifth one that A has to think is collective orientation versus self orientation. Whether A should be thinking about the society as a collective thing, or he has to just think about himself. Okay. In this case, if A is only thinking about himself, he will not think about imparting good education. He will just think that, see, my job is to teach, I will teach and then go. I don't care about if B is passing the exam or is getting the knowledge or not. I will get money or salary out of this teaching, and that is enough for me. So, if he thinks in a self oriented manner, this is what he'll do. But if A thinks in a societal perspective that because of him, B should be becoming an IAS officer tomorrow, or he should be a doctor, etc., etc. A will make 100% sure that he teaches B with the passion, that he teaches B with so much passion and so much, he imparts B with so much knowledge that B becomes a very, very great person in the future. So that depends on what A chooses to be, whether he chooses collective orientation or he chooses himself or a selfish orientation, right? So Talcott Parsons basically says that these are the five different choices that a person has to make up in any situation to act in a particular situation, right? So, if you see these five and these five, you can basically see that the first five, or the five that are on the left hand side, are those values that people choose in the pre modern society mostly. In the pre-modern society, people used to, in India, if you see, we used to honor people on the basis of caste system, right? We used to be very collective in orientation, right? Everything that happens used to happen in the family. Every person in the family used to know if certain decision is taken, and we used to be full of emotions, right? However, as the industrial society came in, or as the postmodern world came in, these values started becoming more and more important. That is, people started becoming selfish, they became very emotionally neutral, and they are very specific, and they are basing everything on achievement. Today, if you have to become a IAS officer, are they going to check whether which caste you belong to? No. They're going to see whether you got the first 1 to 100 ranks or not in the UPSC exam. That is what they're going to check. So, how things or how a particular person behaves in a particular situation depends on these five pattern variables. The choice that he makes in these five pattern variables basically makes that person choose accordingly in that situation and become a personality in that particular situation, right? So these are the five different pattern variables. Now, we have understood the five pattern variables. Let us now see the criticisms of these. Okay. So, what are the criticism? A. Jargon based study. B. It is a grand theory, but he is very America obsessed, and we never know whether all of this can be equally applied to all the societies. Whether they can be applied to all the societies is a question, because not everything can fit up in those five pattern variables. He gave us five pattern variables, and he basically said that these are the only five alternatives. But there can be many other situations, right? Many other situations when not these five, but there can be many other options available to a person to choose from. Sometimes maybe he can think of a selfish interest, but also thinking of a selfish interest might be good for someone else apart from himself, right? So that is something that Parsons forgets to add, because he basically thinks that there are only two options. He doesn't think that there could be a third alternative as well, and there is no sufficient empirical basis. Most of his theories are just the theories that he writes without any proper empirical studies. And then you have, yeah, but I think these are the important ones. In equilibrium, we have already seen, right? In equilibrium, when I was telling you about the moving equilibrium, I've already spoken about how that does not explain drastic changes. Drastic changes are not explained by this equilibrium. So that is another criticism if you want to put it there, right? And here in the grand theory, one of his biggest laws was that his student, who was R.K. Merton, about whom we will be studying in the next class, R.K. Merton himself criticizes Talcott Parsons, saying that we need middle theories. We don't need theories that are all grand and all encompassing, and we need middle theories, right? So that is what R.K. Merton also says, right? So these are the criticism. However, you can say that Parsons had played a very very important role in sociology of America. His theories have had a very profound impact on the American society as well, right? So this is what is Talcott Parsons, and in the next class we'll be doing Robert King Merton, right? Please like the video and subscribe if you like them, and if you have any doubts you can post them in the comments below. And that's all for today, and bye, take care.